Sometimes you don't realize how small someone has made you feel until you finally hear your own silence. That's what it was like the night my husband looked me in the eye and said, "You're 48, Lisa. You can't just start over. Who's going to want you now?" It was after dinner, the kind of quiet, gray evening that makes the house feel heavier than it is. The TV was on low, the dishwasher humming in the background. He didn't even raise his voice. He just said it like a fact, while scrolling through his phone. And the worst part, I didn't say a word back. I just stood there, holding a towel, pretending to wipe a plate, while every piece of confidence I had left cracked inside me. I'd spent 22 years building a life with that man, Michael. 2 kids, a mortgage, a small garden I was proud of, and a marriage I thought could survive anything. I believed that growing older together meant something. But apparently, he saw my wrinkles as expiration dates. It didn't happen overnight. At first, it was small things, jokes about my mom jeans, reminders to dye my hair, the way he'd scroll past photos of younger women online and smirk. Then he started coming home later. Different cologne. Different smile. You know that moment when your gut knows before your mind can catch up? That was me. I found the truth 2 months later. A text that wasn't meant for me. A "can't wait to see you tonight" red heart. Her name was Ashley. His coworker. 29. I remember my hands shaking so bad I dropped the phone on the floor. The sound it made, that dull thud, felt like my heart hitting the ground too. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He just sighed, rubbed his temples, and said, "Lisa, you've changed. You're not the woman I married." I laughed. I actually laughed, the kind of laugh that hurts. "Yeah, Mike. I raised your kids, kept your home, worked 2 jobs, and somehow that made me too much for you to love anymore." He looked away. Coward. That night, I sat on the bathroom floor until the tiles went cold under my legs. I stared at my reflection in the mirror across the hall. Red eyes, gray strands, tired skin. And for the first time in years, I didn't see a wife or a mother. I saw a woman who had been erased piece by piece, until nothing was left but quiet obedience. That's when something inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet. Just a small, stubborn whisper, "No more." I didn't know what "no more" meant yet, but it was the first honest thing I'd said to myself in years. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet, just the sound of the refrigerator humming and the wind pressing against the window. For the first time in a long time, I didn't make his coffee. I didn't pack his lunch. I didn't even glance at his shoes by the door. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, my old journal, and a cup of black coffee that tasted stronger than I remembered. I started writing, not about him, but about me. Everything I'd lost. Everything I still wanted. At first, it was just words like freedom, dignity, peace. But then it became plans. Because that little whisper, "No more," had turned into a voice that refused to be silenced again. I opened a new bank account that afternoon. I remember standing in line at Chase, hands trembling, rehearsing what I'd say if someone asked why. But the clerk didn't ask. She just smiled, printed the papers, and said, "You're all set, Ms. Carter." That small "Ms." hit me like a jolt. I hadn't heard it in decades. I walked out of that bank with something more powerful than cash. I had control. But taking back control isn't clean. It's messy and slow and full of moments when you almost fall apart. Like when I had to sit across from Michael at dinner that night. He was talking about some office project, pretending nothing had happened. And I realized he thought I'd stay. He thought he'd broken me just enough to keep me quiet. I didn't argue. I just watched him, memorizing every smug word, every empty laugh. Because the next time he looked at me, he wouldn't see the woman who begged for love. He'd see the woman who stopped needing his approval. That weekend, I packed a small box. Nothing dramatic, just essentials. My favorite sweater. My mother's locket. The old photo of me before the marriage, where I was smiling for real. I drove to a small apartment on the other side of town. The kind of place with peeling paint but sunlight that poured through the windows. The landlord, an older lady named Donna, asked, "Just you?" I smiled and said, "Yeah, just me." The silence that night was heavy, but it was mine. No footsteps. No judgment. No pretending. Just the hum of freedom, quiet, awkward, but real. Of course, Michael didn't take it well. He called, texted, showed up at my work. He wasn't sorry, he was angry. Angry that I had the nerve to leave without begging. "You're being ridiculous," he snapped one afternoon when I finally answered his call. "You can't just throw away everything we built." I said softly, "You already did, Mike. I'm just cleaning up the pieces." And I hung up. That was the day I realized leaving wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I started walking in the mornings again, cooking real meals for one, cutting my hair shorter, sleeping better. People at work noticed. "You look different," they said. I'd just smile and say, "Yeah, I guess I am." But inside, I knew it wasn't just my looks changing. It was my soul remembering itself. And that was something no man could take credit for. They don't tell you how strange it feels to rebuild your life after 45. People either pity you or praise you, but very few actually see you. When I first told my coworkers I'd moved out, one of them whispered, "Wow, you're so brave." Brave? I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified, like a freshman in life again, only this time with wrinkles, bills, and a tired heart. But every morning, I made myself a promise. I will not go back. I started therapy, something I'd always brushed off. My therapist, Dr. Lang, was this calm woman in her 50s who didn't sugarcoat anything. After I told her what happened, she just said, "Lisa, you spent years apologizing for existing. It's time to stop." That line stayed with me. Because she was right. I had apologized for everything. For getting older, for having opinions, for taking up space in my own marriage. So I stopped apologizing. I joined a fitness class at the community center. At first, I felt ridiculous, surrounded by women half my age in neon leggings. But halfway through that first class, sweating and laughing at myself, something cracked open inside me. It wasn't about losing weight or getting hot. It was about remembering I still had a body. One that was mine, capable, alive, and still learning. Then I did something even scarier. I enrolled in a night course, digital design. It had been my dream before life got busy and safe and small. I remember walking into that classroom, clutching my notebook like it was a shield. The professor smiled and said, "Welcome back to yourself." And for once, I believed him. Meanwhile, Michael kept calling. His tone had changed, no longer angry but guilty. He sent flowers, left voicemails saying, "Let's talk. We can fix this. You know I love you." But I'd learned something in therapy. When someone loves you conditionally, their apologies are just tools of control. So I ignored the flowers. I blocked the number. That's when he got desperate. He showed up at my apartment one night, standing in the rain like some bad movie cliché. "Lisa, please." "I made a mistake," he said. His voice cracked, maybe real, maybe not. For a second, the old habit kicked in, the one that wanted to comfort him. But I didn't move. "Michael," I said quietly, "you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice." He looked stunned. "You really think you can do this without me?" I smiled sadly. "I already am." Then I closed the door. It was the most powerful silence I'd ever heard. After that night, everything started to shift faster. I began dressing for myself, colors I loved, hair natural, skin glowing again. I reconnected with an old friend, Sandra, who told me, "Girl, your glow-up is real. You look like freedom." And maybe I did, because I'd stopped living to be chosen and started choosing myself. But freedom always tests you. And my test was coming soon, one that would force me to stand up, not just for my heart, but for my worth. I thought cutting him off would end things. But Michael wasn't the kind of man who liked losing control. A few weeks later, I got a letter, not from him, but from his lawyer. It was about the house. The house I had helped pay for, clean, maintain, the one where I raised our children. He was trying to sell it without my consent. I sat on the couch, letter trembling in my hands, reading the words over and over. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then the fear turned into something else, something steady, almost calm. He thinks I'll just fold. I didn't. The next morning, I walked into a small law office downtown, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights and dusty blinds. The attorney's name was Rachel Kim, sharp, direct, maybe late 30s. She didn't pity me, she just listened, took notes, and said, "Don't worry, Lisa. We'll make this right." Those 5 words, "we'll make this right," hit harder than any love confession. Because for the first time, someone wasn't telling me to stay quiet or work it out. They were helping me stand up. Rachel explained what I'd need: financial records, old bank statements, proof of my contributions. That night, I went through boxes of papers until 2 a.m. Utility bills, tax returns, receipts from when I'd worked 2 jobs to help with the mortgage. Every piece of paper was a reminder. I hadn't just been his wife. I'd been a partner. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings and phone calls. Michael sent texts again, angry now. "This is ridiculous, Lisa. You're really going to drag this out? After everything I did for you?" I didn't reply, but I screenshotted every single one. When he realized I wasn't bluffing, he tried the guilt route. He even called our daughter, Emma, to get her to talk some sense into Mom. I love that girl, but she's 22, still figuring things out. She asked me, Mom, do you really want to go through all this? And I told her the truth. I don't want a sweetheart. I have to. Because if I don't, he'll keep thinking women like me are too scared to fight back. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, I get it now. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment, eating takeout straight from the container. The city lights outside my window looked different. Not beautiful, not comforting, but honest. Starting over wasn't romantic. It was survival. And survival meant paperwork, lawyers, boundaries, and late-night tears. But it also meant peace. Slowly, I started sleeping better again. No more walking on eggshells. No more checking my phone out of fear. Just breathing. A few weeks later, Rachel called. Her tone was calm but firm. Lisa, we're ready to file. And I have to say, you've got a solid case. I hung up and stared at the ceiling, tears rolling down my face, not from sadness, but from pride. I had built my life once before for someone else. Now, I was building it again, this time for me. And deep down, I knew Michael wasn't done trying to break me. Men like him rarely let go easily. But I also knew something he didn't. I was no longer afraid of being alone. The more I stayed quiet, the louder his desperation got. It's funny, when you stop reacting, manipulators panic. They feed on your fear, your anger, your tears. But when you give them nothing, they start unraveling. It began with small things. He'd accidentally send me texts meant for Ashley, his new girlfriend. Messages like, you look amazing tonight, red heart, or can't wait to see you, babe. Petty, childish, but I saw through it. He wanted me jealous. He wanted me hurt. Instead, I deleted them and went on with my day. Blocked him again. Then he started calling my office. One of my coworkers came up to me, whispering, Lisa, your husband's online too. I took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and said, This is Mrs. Carter. Correction, Ms. Carter. Then I hung up. Rachel told me to document everything. Every text, every call, every unwanted visit. We'll use it if we have to. So I did. I became my own detective, screenshots, notes, timestamps. Every act of harassment turned into evidence of my strength. But even with all that, there were nights when it hit hard. The loneliness. The memories. The way he used to laugh before everything turned bitter. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3 a.m., reach for the other side of the bed, and find only cold sheets. And I'd whisper to myself, you left for a reason. Don't forget that. One night, after a long day at work, I got a knock on the door. It was Ashley. Yes, her. She looked nervous, younger than I expected, maybe early 30s. She said quietly, I think you should know, he's been talking about you. A lot. I stepped aside and let her in. She told me how he'd started drinking more, blaming me for ruining his life, calling me vindictive. I laughed bitterly. So now I'm the villain? She nodded, eyes down. He said you'd never move on, that you were too old to change. That sentence, those exact words, hit me like a punch. Because that's what he'd told me months ago. Too old to change. I looked at her and said calmly, Ashley, he said that to me too. Her eyes widened. For the first time, she saw the man behind the charm. She whispered, I think I made a mistake. I smiled sadly. You didn't. You just believed him. We all did. She left soon after, but that conversation stayed with me. Because it wasn't about him anymore. It was about the cycle. How women keep shrinking themselves for men who never deserved them in the first place. That weekend, I took a long look at myself in the mirror. Same woman. Same face. But my eyes? Different. Steadier. Clearer. I booked a spa day for myself, first in years. Got my hair done. Bought a red dress that actually made me feel alive again. When I walked into work on Monday, people stopped mid-sentence. Wow, Lisa, you look incredible. I smiled. No, I look free. That day, I knew something deep down. Michael wasn't my heartbreak anymore. He was just my history. And my future? That belonged entirely to me. But history wasn't done testing me. Because soon a new letter arrived. One that would bring him face to face with the woman he'd underestimated. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning. Thick white envelope, official seal. It was from the court. Michael was contesting the divorce settlement. I sat there at the kitchen counter, coffee cooling beside me, staring at my name on that paper. He wasn't just fighting for the house anymore. He wanted half of my savings too. The same savings I'd built after leaving him. The same money he said I'd never earn on my own. For a minute, I laughed. Not out of humor, out of disbelief. This man had betrayed me, belittled me, tried to erase me, and still thought he was entitled to my peace. That's when I knew it was time to face him. Not as his wife, not as his victim, but as the woman he no longer had power over. The hearing was set for the following week. The courthouse was downtown, gray walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, the smell of coffee and paper. Rachel met me outside. She looked sharp as ever, holding her folder tight. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. More than ever. When I walked into that courtroom, Michael was already there, suit pressed, hair perfect, confidence dripping off him like cheap cologne. He looked at me with that old smug smile, as if the past months hadn't happened, as if I'd just been a temporary inconvenience. He leaned toward me and whispered, "You could have avoided all this if you'd just listened." I turned my head slowly, met his eyes, and said, "You should have listened when I said no more." The judge entered, and the room fell silent. As the lawyers began, I sat still, hands folded, heart steady. Rachel spoke firmly, showing documents, receipts, the evidence of my contributions, the harassment, the threats. When it was Michael's turn, he played his part perfectly, the wounded husband. "She abandoned me," he said. "I supported her for years. Now she's trying to punish me." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Carter, are you suggesting your wife had no role in the household finances?" He stammered. "Well, she was just, home. Doing home things." Rachel's voice cut through the room. "Your Honor, these are the tax filings showing Mrs. Carter's income contributions during those years. She worked 2 jobs, paid half the mortgage, raised your children, managed your home." I looked straight ahead, calm. He was sweating. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that tells you power has shifted. When it was over, the judge said, "I see no reason to alter the current settlement. Mrs. Carter, you're entitled to your full share." I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. I just breathed, deeply, freely. Because that wasn't just a legal win. It was justice. As we left the courthouse, Michael tried one last time. "Lisa," he said quietly, "you've changed." I stopped in the doorway, looked back, and said, "No, Michael. I just stopped letting you define me." He blinked, stunned. And for the first time in our 22 years, he had nothing left to say. That night, I went home, lit a candle, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat by the window. The city below glowed, alive, restless, forgiving. And I finally felt safe. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about peace. And peace, I realized, was the loudest kind of power there is. You'd think the day after the court ruling I'd wake up euphoric. But it wasn't like that. It was quiet. Peaceful, yes, but quiet in a way that almost felt foreign. I made coffee, fed my cat, and just sat there watching the sunlight stretch across my kitchen floor. For years, my mornings had started with anxiety, what mood he'd be in, what words I should avoid. Now, the only thing I needed to manage was how I took my coffee. That's when I realized freedom isn't loud. It's stillness. It's the ability to breathe without asking permission. I took a week off work, not to escape, but to rebuild. I cleaned out my phone contacts, deleted old messages, and even changed my number. Then I drove 2 hours upstate. No destination, just the open road and my playlist from college days. I hadn't listened to that music in decades. Every song felt like a piece of me I'd left behind. I stopped at a small lake town and rented a cabin for the night. No TV, no signal, just the sound of crickets and water hitting the shore. That night, I stood by the window, hair loose, barefoot, wine glass in hand, and said softly to myself, "This is mine now. All of it." And for the first time in 20 years, I actually believed it. When I returned home, something inside me had shifted. I didn't want to just survive anymore. I wanted to grow. So I threw myself into my design classes. I stayed late in the lab, learning new software, sketching ideas until my fingers cramped. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about reclaiming the woman who used to dream. One afternoon, my instructor, Mr. Alvarez, stopped by my desk and said, "You have a real eye for this, Lisa. Ever think of doing it professionally?" I laughed. "At my age?" He grinned. "Creativity doesn't age. People do." That stuck with me. So I started freelancing on weekends, small gigs, logos, digital flyers. My first paid design job was for a local bakery. When the owner handed me the check, I almost cried. Not because of the money, but because it was mine. Every step forward, no matter how small, felt like a piece of my old self returning. the woman who used to believe she could be more than someone's wife. One day, Emma came by. She'd been quiet through most of the divorce, torn between loyalty and understanding. But that day, she hugged me hard and said, "Mom, you're glowing. I mean, really glowing." I laughed. "It's called peace, sweetheart. It looks good on everyone." She smiled. "You know, Dad's been acting weird lately. Like he's trying to figure out how to talk to you again." I shrugged. "He'll figure out that silence is my final answer." That night, as I was cleaning up, I found my old wedding ring in a drawer. For a moment, I just looked at it, not with anger, but with understanding. It wasn't a symbol of failure anymore. It was proof that I'd survived something that was supposed to destroy me. I slipped it into a small jewelry box and whispered, "Thank you for the lessons." Because in the end, that's what it all was, one long, painful education in self-worth. And I had finally graduated. It had been nearly a year since I walked out of that house. 12 months since the day he told me I was too old to change. And here I was, standing in front of the mirror, fastening the last button of my navy blue blazer, about to attend my first art showcase. My digital designs had been selected for a community exhibition downtown. It wasn't some fancy Manhattan gallery, but to me, it felt like the center of the universe. Every image on that wall represented a version of me I'd fought to rebuild, brave, curious, alive. The event was crowded. I was nervous, clutching a cup of punch like it was armor. Then, from across the room, I saw him. Michael. For a second, I froze. He looked older, heavier around the eyes, posture slightly slouched. He wasn't supposed to be there, but apparently life loves full circles. He approached me slowly, that familiar smirk trying to resurface. "Lisa," he said softly, "you look different." I smiled. "That's because I am." He glanced at my artwork on the wall, bright, confident, full of life. "I didn't know you could do all this," he said, almost to himself. I turned to him, calm and steady. "You never tried to know." He winced a little, then looked down. "I made mistakes." I nodded. "Yes, you did. But so did I. I kept waiting for you to see my worth instead of recognizing it myself." He stared at me, searching for a weak spot that wasn't there anymore. I didn't think you'd move on so fast," he said. I took a breath and looked him in the eyes. "I didn't move on fast, Michael. I just stopped standing still." He blinked, caught off guard. Then, for the first time, I saw it, regret. Real, painful regret. Not for losing a wife, but for realizing he'd broken something that would never belong to him again. "I'm happy for you," he muttered finally, voice small. I smiled, genuine this time. "Good. So am I." Then I turned and walked away. I spent the rest of the night laughing with people who actually saw me, not as someone's ex-wife, but as an artist, a woman, a human being who had remade her life from the ashes of disrespect. When I got home, I slipped off my shoes, poured a glass of wine, and opened my balcony door. The city lights sparkled below, millions of tiny stories happening at once. I thought about the woman I used to be, afraid, uncertain, always apologizing for wanting more. She deserved love too. But what she really needed was herself. Now she finally had that. I leaned on the railing, closed my eyes, and smiled. Sometimes you have to lose everything to see how strong you really are. And sometimes your glow-up isn't for revenge. It's for freedom. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Write it in the comments.